Hi everybody. Today we're going to learn about chemical reactions and how to balance them. We're also going to learn how to write a chemical equation and say a sentence indicating what a chemical reaction is telling us. Some things that you should remember from previous years. I want you to take notes of these things and make sure that you review these. First thing is signs that you have a chemical reaction. Some different things to demonstrate that you've had a chemical reaction. How do you know it's taken place? If two things mix and it produces heat. Two things mix and it produces light. You can have the formation of a gas bubbles. That's not always just because it makes gas bubbles does not necessarily mean it's a chemical reaction. When you open a can of cola, bubbles come out, that's not because of a chemical reaction. But if you mix two things together and bubbles are produced, that can be a sign of a chemical reaction. Formation of a precipitate, which is a solid that's falling out of solution. You mix two clear liquids and you see some solid falling out of it. That's a precipitate. That is an indication that a chemical reaction has occurred. A color change. Once again, not always an indication, but quite often it can be an indication of a chemical reaction. Now, when we have a chemical reaction, it has to observe the law of conservation of mass. You can't have atoms poof appear, and when a chemical reaction takes place, none of the atoms poof disappear. For example, if you look on the screen here, you have two molecules of hydrogen. You have two molecules of oxygen. They are reacting together. The total mass on one side has to equal the mass on the other side. The total mass always stays the same. If we have our hydrogen molecules here and our oxygen molecules here, you'll notice here we had 4 hydrogens. Over here we keep 4 hydrogens. On this side we had 2 oxygens. Over here we have to keep 2 oxygens. Again, they can't just appear or disappear. The masses also have to balance out. 4 grams of hydrogen and 32 grams of oxygen yields 36 grams of water. Atoms can rearrange. They don't disappear, they don't appear. Again, 4 hydrogens on the left, 2 oxygens on the left, 4 hydrogens on the right, 2 oxygens on the right. When we are talking about a chemical equation, there's a way to write it. A would be either a molecule, a mole of something, a compound. The things on the left are 2 different things, A plus B. And the arrow sign, we say yields. It doesn't equals, it doesn't make, we use the term it yields. And on this case, it's making 2 different things, C plus D. All the things on the left side of the equation are what we call the reactants. That's what you start with. You mix them together, and when you do, a chemical reaction takes place, and you end up with the products. Now, there are a lot of symbols in a chemical equation. And you may want to pause your video for a moment and write these down in your notes because you need to know what these mean. You've learned these in the past. I'm not going to go over these right now, but again, you may pause your video and write down what these mean. Okay, we're back. Now, as we write equations, you'll notice that we use symbols. When we have the symbols, they identify the substances involved. For instance, we have here hydrogen. This is letting us know it's a gas. We have oxygen. Remember our Hofbrinkels. H is the hydrogen of Hofbrinkel. O is the oxygen of Hofbrinkel. And then it is making H2O, dihydrogen monoxide, or water. So this identifies the substances. That is where we use the chemical formulas to identify the substances. We use the symbols to show how many there are. Now you notice the coefficients there. Those are the big numbers in front of it. That tells us how many moles are reacting. And in this case we have 2 moles of hydrogen reacting with 1 mole of oxygen. We don't use a 1 as a coefficient, it's just understood. And that yields or produces 2 moles of water. It also tells us, again, what the chemical formulas and in what state. In this case it's telling us we have hydrogen gas plus oxygen gas yielding gaseous H2O or water vapor. Now also you'll notice here that with these numbers we can say this equation. 2 moles of hydrogen gas plus 1 mole of oxygen gas yields 2 moles of water vapor. Sometimes we do not include the states even if they're written there, but you need to know what the symbols mean. Remember the diatomic elements. You're going to need these in order to write equations. Alright, now, here's an example. Look at this carefully, and I want you to say this equation out loud. Don't worry about saying this solid and aqueous for this, but I want you to pause for a minute, look at the video, and just say this out loud. Okay, we're back. What you should have said is 1 mole of zinc plus 2 moles of hydrochloric acid. You need to remember the naming from the last unit. Yields 1 mole of zinc chloride plus 1 mole of hydrogen. Tells us how many and of what. And again, here is it written out so you can see what you should be saying.